City of Albuquerque Human Rights Board will come to order. 5:04.
It looked like you want the light on.
All right. So the first item on our agenda is introductions, and I'm sorry that right off the bat, I don't know what we're doing, but is this to introduce our new members? Brian or Tori, can you tell me?
So we do have an audience today. It looks like we have 11 attendees so far. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself for all the people that are online, then that would be great.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm the chair, the current chair of the Human Rights Board. My name's Adrian Lawyer, and I use he pronouns. And can member Assad go next?
Yes, hi, I'm a member of the Human Rights Board, and I'm Samia Assad. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you. Michael can go next.
Hi, I'm Michael Jefferson. I'm a member of the Human Rights Board, and sometimes I act like the vice chair.
If you don't mind, Strada, will you go next?
Hey all, my name is Shraddha and I am a member of the Human Rights Board. My pronouns are they and she.
Awesome, thanks. Member Trujillo.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joel Trujillo.
And member Pierre.
Hello, my name is Denisha Pierre.
Terrific. Okay, great. All right, so the agenda was distributed in advance. Are there any corrections to the agenda? All right, hearing none, the agenda will be approved as written. The minutes from our most recent meeting were also distributed in advance. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes will be approved as written. Okay, great. So we have our time for public comment on the agenda now. So is there any member of the public who's present who would like to make comment? I see Rosemary Blanchard would like to say something. Great, we'll recognize you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I know this is a 2-minute. My name is Rosemary Blanchard. I am a resident of Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm the Southwest Regional Representative of Human Rights Educators USA. And I won't take a lot of your time because I'm not going to say anything different from what I said the last time and the time before, which is that I truly wish that the Human Rights Board would take an active role in overseeing the way in which the city deals with its homeless population. I've sat through a bunch of meetings with the Community Council for the homeless, and that the city has members on and that there's nonprofit members on. And there's a lot of good things people are starting to do in regard to finding hotels that could be residences for the unhoused people. But there's always going to be some on the streets. And there's a lot on the streets now. And it's cold now. I just finished putting together for my church, Albuquerque Friends Meeting, because that's where so many homeless go, because we have a spigot and they can get water there. I bought them myself on Amazon, little cheap backpacks with a very tiny, it unfolds to full size, but one of those Mylar blankets, and I got a dozen cheap fuzzy blankets. And so I put them in the little cheap backpack with the cheap Mylar thing, because those folks are out on the streets and it gets cold. And people who are visiting with them in our meeting have said, what can we do to help them be warm? Well, what's the city going to do to help them be warm? Tell them they could go to the west side where they don't go, or that we're building something, or we're getting permission to operate a hotel or a facility which isn't ready yet. It's cold now. It's cold tonight and wet. And that is a human right. I have sent to this board before the filing that the Law Center for Homelessness and Poverty sent to the United Nations Human Rights Council for their periodic review on the human rights of homeless people and the record of the United States in meeting those human rights, which is not very good, frankly. They have a motto and a program that they call housing, not handcuffs, because what happens to the people on the streets is that they get arrested. And every time I go across town to pick up my grandkids and bring them over to my house, because that's where they go to virtual school, so their parents can work virtually from home, I go by all those little mini encampments along the sidewalk, under the overpasses, etc. And sometimes I see police breaking them up. Other times I just see people huddling there. When I can give $1 or a cookie, I do. And I know that the city is making good plans, but plans are not a blanket. They don't warm a person on a cold night. They don't give them a place to pee. They don't put any food in their mouth. And there are going to be people on the streets. I would ask you to play an active role with the other bodies of the city. You have oversight powers if you choose to exercise them. It's just a question of, does this board choose to act affirmatively or just wait for people to file complaints? And when you listen to what's going on, do you make recommendations? The listening session we had on police let everybody vent, but it did not change anything. You are good people. Even the police are good people. The mayor is a good person. And the homeless are freezing out on our streets. Good people sometimes produce that result if they get too comfortable. And that's really all I have to say.
Thank you so much for coming today. We're always glad to hear from you and hear your genuine concern for your fellow citizens here in Albuquerque. Does any member of the board wish to reply? Member Jefferson, please.
Chair, what exactly, when we are asked to be affirmative, what exactly does that mean, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I would ask the same thing. I'm not actually clear on in what way this group is empowered to make logistical changes in terms of like providing goods and services to unsheltered citizens of the city. We don't have a budget and we don't have any paid staff. So, and we're an all volunteer board. So I'm not,
And that-
right.
And that goes to the point, Chair. We do need a staff and we do need a budget. And I think it is incumbent upon us to ask the city to follow through on that based on our ordinance. The community is expecting us as human rights activists. We're among many of these activists. They hold us accountable every day as to what we're doing. And if we don't have those components to facilitate a process that can give us some autonomy in decision making, quite frankly, we're just playing a listening game. And I would, and I'm not blaming, gosh knows, Tori and the Office of Equity and Inclusion have done a phenomenal job, but I think the times are mandating that this board be served staff and a budget. It's just the times that we're in.
Well, I know that's on our agenda to talk about a little bit later this meeting, so we'll definitely revisit that. But I don't know, while we still have you here, Rosemary, if it's okay to call you Rosemary.
Yeah, please do. I mean, that's
Okay,
who I am. I'm an old lady who's given her grandkids a place to go to virtual school. They call it granny school.
That's good. That's good. So, I mean, you know our situation as it stands right now, because I know you're a close participant from the community with this board. So
Mhm.
you know that currently we don't have a lot of resource at our disposal. So I'm wondering what do you have things in mind specifically that you think we could do? Or are you
I do.
urging us to try to get these resources?
Well, what I'm urging you to do is, you can't provide services, of course not. That's not what the Human Rights Board is there for. But the Human Rights Board can initiate investigations and research on problems in the city. You have the right to call before you representatives of the city and representatives of the nonprofit community that are working with the homeless right out in the streets. And not just asking them to vent about what they see as a problem or defend what the city says they're doing, but to ask them, you could use a research process as a dialogic process. Sit them down together, subpoena them all in, sit them down together and say, talk to each other. Don't talk about each other. The folks who are working with the people in the streets talk about what the city isn't doing. The city talks about what they're doing. They don't ever talk with each other enough to say, okay, what could we arrange here that would be temporary, that wouldn't be the whole thing taken care of? For instance, how could we have a better handle on where the homeless can take a shit, and how people who engaging with them can contact, who could they contact in the city and say, where is the nearest outhouse that you've put up? Are you talking with each other? Are they talking with each other enough? Because you are not a service provider, you're in the perfect position. I've seen judges do this, grab clients on both sides of an issue and say to them, look, if I have to decide this, none of you are going to like what I come up with. So sit down with each other and come up with a better solution. I've seen parents who wanted to murder each other because they were getting divorced at the time. I was a divorce lawyer once. Boy, do those folks hate each other. But when a judge says whatever I order on your property settlement and child custody is going to be worse than what you want, they sit down and they start talking. And that's what you need. You need the people that are in the East Side ministries. You need people like Ilse Beal sitting down with the service providers of the city and asking these little questions, like when somebody needs to take a leak, how can we help them know where they can go safely? When somebody needs, when it's a really cold, wet night, can we be a little forgiving about the you can't camp out and not arrest somebody because they put a tarp over themselves while they're getting soaked out there in the cold? There's conversations that would happen much more productively if you folks were creating the environment in which they took place. And you have that authority. That research and investigation authority under your ordinance allows you to do that, to say, okay, everybody, we want to talk about this. We had a presentation to members of our church from Healthcare for the Homeless. You know what they talked about? The woman talked about human rights. The failure of human rights for the homeless that are in the streets here in Albuquerque.
Yeah. Yes.
And so everybody in my faith community said, oh, talk to Rosemary. She's always talking about human rights and the homeless too. So she and I are talking with each other, but we're not talking with you together.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you so much for clarifying that. That helps us to think about ways that we could potentially move forward and be, more proactive, as you say.
Your ordinance is a proactive ordinance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you always for being here and for helping us to be held accountable about being part of the solution. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
You bet.
There's still some time on the agenda left for public comment. If anybody else here who's present would like to make comment to the board. All right, seeing none, we'll just move forward on our agenda. And our next agenda item is a discussion and Q&A with Robbie Heckman from APD Forward to fill the board in on the work and the history of APD Forward here in town. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. So my name is Robbie Heckman and I represent La Mesa Presbyterian Church on the APD Forward Coalition. And it truly is a privilege and honor to address the Albuquerque Human Rights Board this evening. The topics I plan to cover and kind of in outline form, I guess I would say, is to just kind of orient you to the composition of the coalition and the work that we do. Provide a very brief overview of the 12th Independent Monitoring Team's report. It's kind of a parade of horribles, so that in and of itself could be its own presentation, but I'll leave some time at the end if you wanted to, if board members or other people want to know some of the details. And then also discuss what APD Forward knows about the stipulated order that is being negotiated currently between the Department of Justice and the City of Albuquerque, which is in direct response to the 12th Independent Monitoring Team's report. And I obviously welcome your questions, and we can drill down on some of the details during the question and answering period, but you're welcome to interrupt me at any time if you have questions. Can I share my screen? Oh, yeah, it looks like I can. Let me see if I can do this quickly here. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, so, and you know, by way of introduction, I'm an archaeologist and an anthropologist by training and profession. And so I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the larger context in which APD Forward Coalition conducts its police reform work. As I'm sure the board members know and understand well, we live in a society that criminalizes behaviors associated with poverty, drug addiction, untreated mental health conditions, and being unsheltered. And I think Rosemary kind of underscored that, that component well in her public comments. And police and policing in America represent kind of the blunt end of those policies and practices, which are further influenced by systemic racism and misguided systems designed to protect wealth and property. So viewed in this larger context, we should not really be surprised by the policing outcomes we see across the country and here in Albuquerque. And so with that kind of larger context in mind, let me talk a little bit about the APD Forward Coalition. And so I have here on the screen a list of the coalition partners. You know, I won't recite them all, just suffice to say that there are several community groups that are part of the coalition, as well as individuals, and predominantly the individuals who are part of the coalition are family members of people who have suffered from police violence and family members being killed. And so APD Forward was formed in 2014 while the Department of Justice was investigating APD. And in April of 2014, the Department of Justice released their findings letter describing a pattern and practice of excessive uses of force, which were emboldened and enabled by a culture of aggression and a failure to hold officers accountable at APD. And so that's the findings letter. And I think that as I move through the presentation, you'll see in IMR 12 that many of those exact same things that brought the Department of Justice to town and that had existed for, frankly, decades in Albuquerque persist to this day. And so as its goal, APD Forward was organized to be a powerful advocacy, outreach, and education platform for Albuquerque communities to press for the desperately needed reforms to ensure transparency and accountability at APD. I became the La Mesa Presbyterian Church representative in 2016 after my experience as an impaneled juror for the trial of Keith Sandy and Dominic Perez. If you recall, those were the two officers who were charged with killing James Boyd in the foothills of the Sandias in March of 2014, just shortly after the release of the findings letter. So I just want to very briefly go over the structure of the court-approved settlement agreement and the parties to the also known as the CASA. I'll probably switch back and forth during the presentation, which is the acronym for it. And so the lawsuits are the city of Albuquerque versus the United States. And so in effect, the Department of Justice serves as the Albuquerque community's lawyers. And represents our interests in reforming APD per the stipulations in the CASA. And the Albuquerque Police Officers Association, which is the union, is an intervener in the case. And their standing has recently been kind of pretty clearly defined. It was originally defined as anything that might impact their collective bargaining agreement. They would have recourse and standing in court to address that. They tried to exceed that level of involvement and were most recently shut down in that regard. They tried to change recently one of the use of force policies that was filed, that was approved by the monitor, approved by the city, and they took that to court, and the judge found them that wasn't within their purview to question. If the city of Albuquerque wants to have a higher standard for use of force, they're certainly able to do that. And so that was I think a good outcome in that particular instance. And APD Forward is an amici to the lawsuit. So the lawsuit is monitored, and APD's performance is monitored by an independent monitor, Dr. James Ginger. I'm sure many people are familiar with him. But it's really important to note, the media talks about Dr. Ginger and he's making $1 million a year, and he has a team of subject matter experts. And so this is really a gift to the city of Albuquerque, because this team of subject matter experts that includes experts in training and police training, tactics, investigations, 21st century policing, they are provided unfettered access to APD, and in turn provide specific recommendations and corrective action that can be taken to ensure that they're following the stipulations in the court-approved settlement agreement. Now, they submit regular reports, and they're on a rhythm now where they submit 2 reports a year. And so IMR 12 covers February 2020 through July 2020. But I have to say that the reports, if anyone's dared open them and tried to read them, they're incredibly dense, 400 or 500 pages long. And they're just difficult to access. And so one of the things that APD Forward has done is we've created this interactive website called the Smart CASA, and it's smartcasa.org. And in there, we've compiled all of the 12 reports from the independent monitoring team. We have kind of a graphic display per stipulation. So you can go and look at APD's performance over that time. You can click on page numbers, drill down to what the monitoring team reported for that particular stipulation. And so it's, it's still a pretty opaque and kind of wonky thing to be engaged in, but it's, I think it makes these reports a little more accessible for the community. And so that's something that, we're quite proud of, that we're able to pull together. And frankly, the Department of Justice lawyers, because we don't editorialize in there, we just reflect what the monitoring team has reported. And so quite frankly, the Department of Justice lawyers use the Smart CASA. I think some of the city attorneys have said that they've used it. Certainly the media uses it to get up to speed on where APD is in the court-approved settlement agreement. So let's turn now to the Independent Monitoring Report 12. And leading up to the filing of the report, in October of 2020, there was a status hearing in which the judge asked Dr. Ginger if APD was in trouble. And so some of these quotes are up here, were his direct reply to the judge, which I think we are on the brink of catastrophic failure at APD, and that he's been doing this since the 90s, and this is the worst case that he's seen a department in at this point in the reform process, and it's significantly alarming to him. So how bad is IMR 12? It identified systemic failures at every level of potential accountability, from field officers, their actions, and obvious policy violations, some of which were relatively minor, but a lot of which were significant and essentially violating people's basic, human rights and constitutional rights. And then these systemic failures went all the way up to the executive leadership, including the chief of police. And the monitor kind of concluded that APD simply has no current appetite for discipline, either reformative type discipline, identifying deficiencies in officers, deficiencies in training, and getting them remedial training, redirections, transfers, if that's anything, or actual discipline, such as suspensions and terminations. And so the department, and I can provide some very specific examples of that if folks would like to hear those directly out of the IMR 12. But so the Department of Justice response, so what happens? Because we were wondering this too, what happens when things get this bad in the monitoring process or in the court-approved settlement agreement and the reform process? And the Department of Justice's response to IMR 12, which is the independent monitoring report, is to create a stipulated order. The details of the order are currently being negotiated between the city and the Department of Justice, and they've promised APD Forward and amici groups in the community a chance to look at the draft prior to its filing. But in essence, what we've learned is that the stipulated order will identify a third party identified by the Department of Justice that will be retained by the city of Albuquerque, that will oversee minimally all use of force investigations from the beginning to the end, with the intent to try to provide corrective action in more real time. Because right now, as you can see, the monitoring periods come out like the January through July, and then the report doesn't actually get filed until November. And so we're, by that time, the community is starting to learn of these things, and APD is now on record and trying to address them. And so there's this kind of significant lag. And so the Department of Justice is trying to address that with the stipulated order and trying to do real-time correction. At this point, because there's no draft that's been made available, we've only heard these things in meetings. APD Forward really only has questions regarding the stipulated order. And the first one is, could they articulate in a meaningful way how it's going to address the chronic and systemic failures that were identified in the 12th monitoring report? And this, what's known as the counter CASA effect, which is this willful non-compliance with the CASA, which is brazen and quite well, it permeates all ranks within the department. It's quite clear. So one of our questions so following on to that is, could the stipulated order be leveraged to design and implement a permanent framework? At some point in time, APD may be able to get out from under the court-approved settlement agreement, and then what goes away is that monitoring and that unprecedented transparency and access that the community has. And so APD Forward is hoping that we can leverage some of this to create permanent transparency and accountability structures that will outlast the CASA and could possibly be codified in city statute, so that moving forward, we would still have access to and be able to respond to these things that, if we didn't have the court-approved settlement agreement, quite frankly, we wouldn't know the detail and the depth of it. We would be receiving media reports like, we have. And then also the stipulated order, we're hoping will address the city council's just failure to fully appoint a full complement of CPOA board members. They've also dragged their feet on staffing some of these. So I'm kind of empathetic with the conversation that went before where you guys don't have a staff, a budget. You know, when they revised the statute, the enabling statute for the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, they actually changed the funding mechanism so that now, instead of being just a fixed percentage of the overall police budget, now that agency has to come before the city council and defend their budget, which of course opens it up to a political process. And so we're very concerned that that could be used to kind of continue to marginalize and minimize the CPOA board, the Civilian Police Oversight Agency's effectiveness. And so we would like to see a stipulated order try to address that. And also we would like to see the Civilian Police Oversight Agency be a big part of that permanent framework we'd like to see put in place for transparency and accountability as part of the stipulated order. And so with that, I mean, we have our website where we have resources. We do a review of each of the independent monitoring team's reports. We try to just do it in 2 pages so that it's very concise and digestible for the public and really highlights the problematic issues that were identified by the monitoring team. And it's really important to note too that the monitoring team doesn't just, you know, call out all APD's transgressions. They also have very specific proposals for them to address and remedy those issues, because oftentimes the monitoring team has seen the exact problems in other departments, and so they make those recommendations. And to date, APD has made progress in some areas, but in some of the most critical areas. And frankly, the reason that the Department of Justice came to town are still absolutely wanting. And as I said before, there's even just a willful non-compliance. And quite frankly, the police union is a huge problem, an obstacle in that regard. And so with that, I'll open it up to questions. I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Thank you so much, Robbie. Would you mind sharing now so that we can see each other?
Sure.
All right, members, does anybody have comment or question for Mr. Heckman?
I do.
Member Assad.
Mr. Robbie, we are the Human Rights Board, and we want to know what agenda can we push to help you accomplish what you want as with APD Forward and the police. We feel frustrated that there hasn't been any serious attempt to address the concerns of the DOJ and the community. And with everything we're witnessing across the country, Albuquerque is still on the map on that. So please let me know how we can help out and what we could push forward on this board.
Yeah, thank you for that. I actually have a couple of bullet points here that might answer that question. I mean, I think first of all, we're at an inflection point, right? There's a police chief search, and I think APD Forward's position, we've articulated this to the city, and we have on our website, we have a set of criteria that we've developed that we think would be important for any new police chief to meet. And I think we'd also, you know, invite you to join us to kind of pressure the mayor to not settle for someone inside APD again. I think we need, it's APD Forward's position that we need someone from outside to come in and to make the necessary changes. One of the things that we see with the police union and which, you know, the police chief isn't going to be able to necessarily change that. But what we see with the police union and their collective bargaining agreements and what they call the bidding process allows officers to bid after they get to a certain seniority. They can then say, hey, I want to go work over in, you know, command area X with Commander Y and Lieutenant Z, because they're buddies. And frankly, it's been demonstrated that they won't be held accountable. And you know, of course, our system of laws, no one would be allowed to investigate their friends, right? People would be, a judge would recuse themselves, a lawyer would recuse themselves. However, we have this structure at APD where there's close camaraderie, and then they're asked to do investigations of each other. And surprise, surprise, the investigations are full of boilerplate, exculpatory language, defending the conduct of the officer, and primary, it's supposed to be an administrative investigation, supposed to investigate the officer's actions. And APD turns in administrative investigations that essentially defend the officer's actions and focus on the individual and how bad they were and what they did. And or we have a situation reported in IMR 12 where they try to indemnify themselves as part of the investigation and say that they're providing testimony, and they aren't waiving any of their rights, and they claim Garrity, which is the lawsuit about state actors and their employees incriminating themselves as part of an investigation. It's really just wildly dysfunctional. And so we think that if an outside person who has reform experience could begin to address that, because it's more than just discipline, it's training, it's all the above. And then I think also, I've mentioned it before, but the collective bargaining agreement. I mean, that's one thing that we have focused on, and there are things that are in the collective bargaining agreement that are codified in state statute that, of course, unless and until they're out of state statute, will never come out of the collective bargaining agreement. However, there are some things that are in the collective bargaining agreement, like investigative timelines and things like that, that really thwart discipline and even progressive discipline, that we would hope could be removed or the timeline extended. Of course, you know, we support due process. The due process that is afforded officers is almost mind-boggling when you start to look at it. It's not it's not anything that's going to produce anything other than the results that we are seeing now. And so those are kind of two of the main things I think that the Human Rights Board might be able to help us with in moving forward and trying to affect change. It's unclear. The collective bargaining agreement expired in July of 2020. They say that they've stalled all negotiations due to COVID, but it's quite clear to me, and this is my assumption and my inference, is that the union has no appetite to come and sit down and negotiate it right now because of the environment across the country. So the result of that is, though, that their previous agreement is evergreen. So it just stays in place, despite it expiring. It stays in place unless and until they negotiate a new agreement. And it's an election year, the mayor's up for election, and it is the mayor and the mayor himself. Those negotiations are done in private by the Labor Relations Board at the city of Albuquerque. And then the decision is the mayor's, I believe, and the mayor's alone. So that it's kind of an opaque and very difficult thing to penetrate. But I think there are some examples across the country. Austin, Texas comes to mind, where they were able to exert significant public pressure on the mayor and the city council, and they got a very, they were able to change a lot of those dysfunctional things in the collective bargaining agreement with that city.
Michelle, did you want to, oh, thank you. Sorry. Michelle, did you want to speak?
Just a question, if the other board members don't have any, I don't want to jump the line.
No, you go ahead and then we'll check to see. There was an attendee also I want to recognize, but you go ahead.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Heckman. Really great summary of where we're at. I'm Michelle Melendez. I'm the director of the city's Office of Equity and Inclusion, just to let you know where I'm coming from. I just have a question about, are any of the organizations that are amici and in this Albuquerque Forward, are they paid to do the work that you're doing and that you've been doing for many years? No.
No, I mean, there are small grants from the Borealis project that offset some of the thing, but for me, no, absolutely not. And the other organizations, I mean, Julian's the executive, Adrian, excuse me, is the executive director of the Transgender Resource Center, which is a member of the coalition as well. So yeah, no, there's no funding available.
And you don't have any staff per se, so it's all volunteers coming together and coming to.
Yeah, we have applied for some grants to try to get an administrator because, all the people who are on the coalition are very busy people, as you can imagine. And then when the New Mexico, in my observation is when the New Mexico state legislature goes into session, it's very difficult for folks, have other more pressing and immediate priorities to maintain the work.
Yeah. And is there any thought to having staff, or if you had city staff, would that be kind of a conflict of interest?
I think so. I mean, I don't know how that would work out. I'm obviously not a lawyer, but it's an interesting thing. I mean, one of the things we've been pushing is to try to get some of the things that are in the court-approved settlement agreement codified in city statute. Now, the one thing I will say is that what I've learned through doing this work is that, we say that we want to advance constitutional policing. Well, constitutional policing is the absolute floor. I mean, that's where we're at now. I mean, you see, with the Graham v. Connor and the way that people are able to evoke what are absolutely subjective things and have them be viewed as objective in court, officers in particular in their defense. And I mean, I think the Keith Sandy and Dominic Perez trial was an example of that. So I don't know. I think there's a lot there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think one of our concerns is, again, as I said, that the DOJ and the court-approved settlement agreement is going to leave, is going to expire, or they're going to graduate out of it at some point in time. They aren't anywhere near that now, but we've got to be leveraging this to create structures that can then remain and still provide the community the kind of transparency and access that the independent monitoring team has.
Okay, I don't want to cut y'all short, but I know we're over time on the agenda item, and I did want to recognize attendee Jay Wilson. I saw that you had your hand up earlier. Did you still have a comment or question? A brief comment or question? Jay Wilson. Oh, I think they've left the room.
No, I'm still here. I'm still here.
Oh, great. Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yes.
You're being moved in. Thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
No, absolutely. First off, I want to say, Mr. Heckman, thank you for your time and for your insights. I just wanted to ask, I'm very much a deep believer in the fact that pretty much people are the ones that generate culture. And I know you did talk about how historically APD has culturally been aggressive. I would like to know, just as far as some of the examples or some of the tactics are concerned, what are some of the tactics being employed in throughout those systematic failures that allow these bad actors to still stay in these positions? And I would also like to know, if possible, as far as just some of the more immediate penalties that these folks are facing, what's getting in the way of implementing that? And what are some of the more desirable penalties, you will we'll say that should be implemented?
And Robbie, again, I know this is a big topic, but if you can keep it short so that we can move forward on the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me just read something very quickly. And so in the 12th monitoring report, the monitor repeatedly blasts the department's inability, unwillingness to notice even major policy violations and take corrective action. In one case, APD failed to hold officers accountable for intentionally slamming the car door on the head and shoulders of an arrested individual who was in a mental health crisis and force him back into the squad car. Neither Internal Affairs nor the Force Review Board identified the actions as uses of force, even though they reviewed all the video evidence. So, what you're seeing is a permissive culture. By the way, some of those individuals are repeat offenders, have been subjects of the independent monitoring team's report. And some of the other things I mentioned earlier, the collective bargaining agreement, some of the things that are in the state statute, really work to thwart authority. And that's what enables bad apples to be bad apples for their entire career. But it's, as you alluded to with the culture, it's much worse than that. It's a permissive culture. One of the officers' disciplines was to go and talk to the academy about the discipline that they received. And his 4-minute speech to the academy was about how he was a political subject of a political witch hunt. And so you can't say those things in an environment where the culture isn't receptive to that. I mean, that was his punishment. So I think it's as bad as it gets.
Thank you again so much for giving your time to the board tonight and being here with us. Thank you, Jay Wilson, for your question and for being here as well. Oh, Member Jefferson, go ahead. Then we really got to move forward.
Yeah, understanding. I reserve my question till we get down to number 8 there.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you again, Robbie, so much. We really appreciate you.
Most welcome. Thank you to all of you for your work as well.
All right. Our next agenda items are the director's reports. So we will start with the Office of Civil Rights.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to pull up my report. So I can't see you all. So if you have any questions for me, please just jump in because I won't see you raise your hand. So we sent the report to you in advance. You see that we have 49 new matters in the last about 60 days since we last saw you in November. I think it slowed down a little bit in December, which is to be expected. We have 5 pending complaints. The first one is one that you've seen for a while. We've just had a struggle with getting that one set for mediation. It's not through the fault of any of the parties or the city office. There have just been issues that come up requiring it to be rescheduled. The second one is the one that I was hoping to have ready for you on investigation. But while Crystal and I were working on that one, a complainant let us know that she was forced to resign. So we're amending that complaint. The third one, we are currently investigating. The fourth one, that one, Crystal is working with the parties on settling. And then the fifth one, we worked on settlement. We were unable to resolve it in settlement. So now we are working on investigating that matter. Any questions about the pending matters? Okay. All right, so completed the local restaurant that did not have accessible bathrooms for patrons who required them and also did not have adequate signage for accessible parking or appropriate number of parking spaces. That one was closed in December at the request of the complaining party. she indicated that something had come up in her personal life that did not allow for her to devote resources and energy to this matter right now. Then on outreach, because it was, November and December, we were a little quieter, but I presented to the UNM Regent Scholars in November regarding civil rights, and I co-presented at the City Legal Ethics Continuing Legal Education Seminar. We are co-sponsoring the 30 Days of Nonviolence that started yesterday, and we will be presenting on the Crown Act, and I'm going to talk about that in my other updates. So my office successfully supported the Crown Act amendments to our Human Rights Ordinance. And so Crown means creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. These changes include hair types, textures, and styles that are closely linked with race and culture within the protections regarding race discrimination. This is very rooted in uplifting Black women and recognizing 400 years of hair-based discrimination that Black women have suffered. We were very privileged that Councillor Sena recognized this as an issue and helped add it to the Human Rights Ordinance. I think we are number 6 or 7 in cities and other municipalities in the state to have added it. So we're definitely leading the movement there. And then there is a corollary pending right now in the state legislature. It's House Bill 29. So we should start hearing a little bit of movement on that in the next few days. Then also, Chair Lawyer presented Transgender 101 as a community session last week. It was very well attended, and we got just rave reviews back. We always do when Adrian presents, but I'm always super excited when new people get to experience his seminar and share their excitement. And then I also chair the Domestic Violence Task Force for the city, and Dawn Begay with OEI co-chairs and vice chairs, I'm so sorry. And so through the Domestic Violence Task Force, we were given $250,000 in CARES Act money that we distributed to, I believe, 13 agencies to help with the unexpected expenses they've had during times of COVID. And so it came out to about $19,000 per agency. And we distributed those the week before Christmas. So it's very, very timely end of the year. Then otherwise, I have quite a few upcoming legal and other community-based sessions I'm going to present to. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just tell you what the topics are. A general racism, anti-racism conversation, a few fair housing matters, quite a bit of Crown Act work. Going to present to some high school students on voter suppression. And that one, I don't have that one mapped out yet, but what I want to do is start at Reconstruction with how people of color were prevented from voting, and then bring it all the way to whenever it stops this year, maybe tomorrow, but and we only have an hour, so it's going to be really interesting how we can't go very deep, but the 2020 election has been so ripe with new forms of voter suppression. So that's really it. Any questions or thoughts?
It's all so exciting, and congratulations on the Crown Act. It's such a great thing. It's just what a great achievement, and you must
Thank
be
you.
so proud. That's really great. Members, does
Michelle.
anybody have a question or comment?
I want to thank you for all your work on the Crown Act. This was something that was brought my way as well, and I thought it was specifically special to have our Black sisters lead on it. But I do know there's a component addressing the hijab in it. So as a Muslim woman,
Yes.
from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much.
Thank you, Samia. And thank you for mentioning that, because I failed to mention that. Yes, we expanded the language that most cities and states are doing to be more culturally inclusive. So we included cultural headdresses in order to include our Muslim sisters and our indigenous communities. And the state version will not 100% mirror, but will be pretty close, at least the version that they're proposing right now.
Who's sponsoring in the state?
I believe Linda Lopez, but I'm not certain. I'd have to look that up and tell you for sure.
Great. Great, great. All
And
right.
Michelle has her hand raised.
Oh, great. I think it was just not down from before. Is this back up or still up?
I don't know if I ever put it down. Sorry. But I do have a question for Tori. How can people get enforcement? Should they call the office or 311 if they feel like they've been discriminated against?
Yes, thank you. So they can call our office at 768-4595. They can reach us at civil rights at cabq.gov, or they can call 311. And we are working on getting more information out into the community about enforcement. Just COVID has changed the way we do everything. So hopefully some of these community information sessions will help with that.
Thank you.
Terrific. Great
Thank
question.
you.
Thank you. All right.
Anything
Anybody, any final comments or questions for Tori? Thank you so much.
Thank you
Terrific
all.
work,
Thank
terrific
you.
work. All right, Michelle, are you ready for the Office of Equity and Inclusion update? You're on mute. Because 2020.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm tired, as you can tell. It's been a long year already. So I have a few updates. We'll be hiring a new African American Affairs liaison. So I hope that that position is posted this Friday. I will definitely ask you to share it. You'll get it in our newsletter. And I believe that we've added the new members to our newsletter. If I haven't, I will definitely add you. I'll ask Crystal for your contact info because we send out a weekly newsletter and it's got a jobs listing that we ask people to really share to get the word out. And let's see what else. We have about 5 interns coming on in the next few months. So that really has extended our capacity a lot because these are really high performing, you know, everything from high school to graduate students. So some good stuff coming along there. I'll have a little bit of a gap in the immigrant and refugee affairs for a little while, just a staffing change that will leave me with nobody in that position for possibly a month, hopefully less if I can find somebody quickly. Let's see, we are in the middle of budget process now, so I'm glad that you're talking again about your budget needs. We start this early for the June 30th end of this fiscal year, starting the July 1st budget period. So Tori and legal can actually submit a budget request, but we do have to have thought through what do we need? You know, how would you spend the money? And last year I offered a small amount from the Office of Equity and Inclusion for any kind of events that you might have. And that still stands. We still have some Kellogg grant money. So if any HR board member wants to sponsor, or it's not a member, but the whole board wants to sponsor some kind of an event, we would be happy to help cover the costs of that kind of an event. And as far as staffing goes, that we should also be really specific with what kind of staffing needs, because really you do have staff right now. You've got Tori who runs the Office of Civil Rights, and you've got me, and you've got Crystal, and you've got the attorney who helps the board get through meetings. But if there's a gap there, then we should really define what that is and what kind of work this person would do. And that's why I was trying to really fess out, like, what is it about this amici group that really gives them the independence that they have to really critique and be completely independent. And it's the members that have all of that ability to call into question what's going on with the city. And I think as long as you have that independence, you should use that, because that's the beauty, I think, of the HR ordinance, is this independently empaneled group of community members that have a lot of authority and responsibility, but a lot of authority. And I don't know what you would do differently if you had different staff, but you know, that's a question to be really defined so that we can pursue the channels. When you're drafting a budget, you have to justify all of this. So
Can I answer that, or do we
Oh,
have to wait for your? done?
Actually, that's on the agenda for just a little bit later, if you don't mind,
Okay.
Member Said, and we'll have more discussion. I hope that you don't need to leave, Michelle, and you can stay with
No,
us.
yeah,
Okay,
totally.
great.
So I'll go quickly. We've got a whole bunch of training planned for the whole year, and we set out a monthly training calendar. So I'll be sending you all that and invite you as board members to participate in our trainings. I think we ended the year with nearly 600 city employees trained and about 300 community members. Some of that training is for APD. We started this past week with a new group of ambassadors, and thank you to Samia and Adrian, our trainers in-house. Thank you again for providing the training that you do to the cadets. This other one was a group of ambassadors, they're called, and they're taking responsibility for getting to know different segments of the community so that they can have better relationships. And those same members that were in the training last week are going to be participating in very, very intensive 4-day anti-racism training later this month. So that's how we're starting the year, is anti-racism training for APD ambassadors. So lots of training going on, and a lot of it will be open to all of you. Some of it is employees only, but some is open to the community. We're also completing our 2020 workforce equity analysis. So that'll tell you what the makeup of the employees at the city is. And as soon as that's ready, we will give that to you all. We are mapping all kinds of data, including where people are getting evicted, where people are getting rental assistance, where people are getting food distributions, so that we can identify any gaps in the city that are existing. And let's see. We were very pleased to partner with community organizations to distribute 2.5 million to people who had been left out of the stimulus payments last year. So that money went very, very quickly. 8 hours, 2.5 million was spoken for. That's how deep the need is that we know in our community. So our office has really just been focusing on trying to get the word out to community about resources that are existing and connect them so that they can try to keep their families above water. And we do that in 5 or so languages to the extent possible to keep up with all of the changes so that families aren't left completely out by themselves. And I could go on, there's too much to share, but I'll take any questions and be sure to invite you all to our trainings that are coming up. So
We
thank
do have
you.
a few more minutes. I certainly don't want you to cut off anything you want to tell us.
Okay, I'm reading from a report to my boss to give you, I'm like, okay, I don't want to tell all of this. This is too much.
Anything else you think might be of interest to us or not is great. I see you, Member Pierre, 1 sec.
Well, I'll be meeting with the ADA board. It's a counterpart to you all next month. So I just recall that before our office existed and before Tori's office existed, the Human Rights Board and the Human Rights Office was all of our predecessor. And they spent a significant amount of time looking at ADA issues and staffing the ADA Council. And so I think not to take away from what you've said your needs are, but imagine if you were the board that was primarily responsible for all things ADA, and that the 2 staff members that you had were going out and measuring curbs and doing analyses to see if ADA violations had occurred. So I'm glad that we've really drastically expanded the city's capacity by adding 3 ADA coordinators in different departments of the city to really take ownership of those important ADA issues. And that doesn't take away all of the complaints that Tory receives, but there's just so much more that needed to be done in terms of city and public. And I'm glad that the city has taken that seriously and expanded our whole city's capacity. And that has opened up capacity for Tory to do what she's doing, because none of this was ever done before. And the ADA board spent a whole lot of its time dealing with those issues before any of us were members or staff for you all. Just some history. It's only 3 years ago, but seems like a forever ago.
It's helpful to know that context, I think.
Thank you.
Great. Member Pierre, did you want to ask or say something?
Yeah, I had a question, Michelle. So what are, you were talking about trainings. What kind of trainings are you guys doing at the Office of Equity Inclusion? I'm obviously new, so I don't know exactly what you guys are training for. And I have a few other questions, but maybe you'll answer them when you answer this.
Sure, definitely.
Great question.
And I'll put a link in the chat as well, because I won't be able to list all 20, but we've got about 20 different workshops. Everything from Racial Equity 101, just to give people a baseline on what is racial equity, to 4-day intensive anti-racism training. And we've got, LGBTQ training, ADA training, how to work with Native populations, how to work with African American populations, which is our newest training module. And so we've mostly trained non-police, but recently we've been asked to start training police more and more. And I'll have to tell you, we're going to really have to change our approach, because we're not as successful with police as we are with other groups. They're just a hard group to get across with. So, but we really enjoy a lot of our other training with the city, because so many people are hungry for this information on what they can do differently in Parks and Rec and Family and Community Services and Transit and other really useful, departments, on how they could do a better job working with all these different populations and serving these populations, and doing better outreach, and how to be more responsive culturally and, just from many perspectives. So I'll send you the whole list. I'll get it in the chat, because we've got a really cool training team, and we work with community trainers. That's who we bring in to do all of this. We do some of it in-house and some of it national, but a lot is community-based trainers that we're bringing into the city.
Okay. And are these trainings ongoing, like yearly, or are they kind of like, Parks and Rec does it this 1 year and then you might go to some other,
Yeah.
how does like follow-up work and making sure that these topics are sticking?
Yeah, that's a good point. We repeat the trainings every few months. So if you miss it this month, it'll come back around. But very little of it is mandatory, and that's by design. We're really trying to build a coalition of the willing, people who want to learn this work and be champions, and not try to bring in people who are there to resist. So it's a strategy, and we've gotten more. Now it's probably about 1,500 city employees through some kind of training over the past 3 years. So, and some people keep coming and they go to all of our trainings now, and we're cultivating champions within different departments to really own the work in their departments. And then if they wanted to form like affinity groups and support groups, we would support that, but we're not artificially creating that, because we wouldn't want to assume anything. But if they started coming up like they have in other cities, we would try to find a way to support them in their caucuses or affinity groups of any kind. And so that's how we're approaching it. There are some mandatory trainings. So we passed a law last September that mandates mandatory training for the mayor's office and city council. And we finished training the mayor's office and city council last December. I should have said that because this board hasn't met since November. But yeah, we trained all city council staff, mayor, and all of the mayor's staff in racial equity. Advancing racial equity in city government is the title of the workshop.
Great. Crystal, did you have something you needed to add?
Actually, the city does have an ADA advisory board. We also have our ADA coordinator here. I'm going to promote her to a panelist. Her name is Jordan Vargas.
Oh, great.
Ms. Vargas, can you talk now?
There we go.
So sorry, I don't know what happened. As soon as you said my name, I got kicked out of the Zoom. I don't know what happened. And also, I'm gonna leave my camera off because I have a puppy on my lap right now. So
No, put it on.
okay, hold on. I'm sitting on my couch though, so no judgment.
No, none. We just want some puppy action.
Okay, he's fairly new.
Oh, oh, oh my goodness.
He's pretty cute.
Really cute.
I'll make it so you can see my face. I'm not sure if there's specific questions, but I do work very closely with Tori's office, with Miss Tori and Miss Crystal. I also work very closely with Michelle's office as well. I do work with her office on providing some of the ADA training for city staff. I'm very specific to Title II of the ADA, which is state and local government. So I just work with city departments and staff on accessibility within the city. I don't really do anything else outside of that. So anything that has anything to do with some of the stuff that Tori's office handles, like, you know, any apartment issues or things like that, her office handles those. And then the city also has an individual that handles employee requests and accommodations that is outside of me, and that's Title I. So her name is, why am I blanking? Heather. Why can't I remember her last name? Heather Cowan, thank you. I saw you mouth at Michelle. And she's really awesome. Her and I work very closely together as well. So if there's any ADA related questions, I'm happy to help. I'm happy to answer anything. I know we're limited on time at the moment, but I'm here if needed.
Great. Thanks so much to Crystal and Jordan and Michelle for helping us to know what resources are out there and how we can help connect people who need these things. This is really great for us to know. Oh, and thanks, Michelle, for putting that in the chat. Okay, did you have any final comments or anything, items to add, Michelle? No, all good. Okay, great. Great. Thank y'all so much for the reports. It's always really informative. So our final agenda items are the two administrative matters. The first is a subcommittee review and discussion. And I'm not sure if do we have report backs from the subcommittees, or I'm not sure what this means. Member said.
I was going to say, let Mr. Michael Jefferson go on
Oh,
that.
great. Member Jefferson, go ahead. Almost. Yeah.
I be thinking that they got the picture of the mic underneath your picture in the bottom left-hand corner. I be clicking on that to unmute. I mean, Zoom done raised over $1 billion in the last 2 months. You think they could fix that little glitch, right? But I like to suggest that we have in the light that we haven't scheduled a retreat. I wondered if we could discuss some items that could go into committee. For example, I would like us to take to committee the homeless piece and work on it and see what we can work on from the aspect that's been asked, so that we're not at the same place we were tonight. that's about the third meeting in a row that we're in the same place. So I like to see if we could probably take that to committee. I'm not quite sure when the city of Albuquerque plans to end the search for police chief, and I don't know where they're at. But I would like to maybe go to committee and have a discussion about placing a recommendation of not so much of an outside person. I don't care if the person is outside or inside. I'd rather see a civilian take over the chief of police. Here's the history of the police department. All you're doing is moving around the cancerous mindset of law enforcement, because you take a chief from Chicago and you put him in Los Angeles. You take the former chief of New York and you put him in Jacksonville. So all you're doing is moving around this cancerous mentality of police enforcement. I think you need to get an objective civilian in there with no police experience, administrative experience maybe, but we don't need no more military-minded people trying to straighten out a militant organization. So that would be the second thing. And I didn't quite get what what he said. The other thing he thought we could do, he thought we could help with the police chief, and I didn't quite get that other piece. I'm not that good at writing that fast.
Robbie, I know you're still here. What were your 2 bullet points for us around how we can participate? I hope you're not now napping. Now I'm calling his name. If you're still here, Robbie, we'd love to hear that synopsis. And if not, we'll get those notes from you after. So go ahead, Member Jefferson. Go ahead.
Okay, and then the other thing on the ADA piece, I had introduced several times about compliance issues especially with buildings. It'd probably be almost every building in the city almost that are pre-ADA law and policy that were grandfathered. Well, I don't know if anybody here, I know somebody, Jordan, she might can, fill us in later. We don't have to do it right now, but I know they grandfathered a lot of these buildings, but I mean, how old we gonna let granddaddy get? 1500? I mean, come on. Grandfathering needs an end somewhere, okay? And also, so that's another thing I think we could take to committee also. And then another thing that I thought that we might want to discuss would be that, to me, and I could be wrong because I'm just on the outside looking in, but the information on this COVID, it's all over the place. So you got people all over the place. You got people who think it's real, people who don't think it's real, people who think it's a cult, and blah, 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 all that stuff, right? Well, one of the things that we talked about last year in our retreat was doing education. And I wondered, would it make sense for us as the Human Rights Board to be part of some education to get out here in the public? look, everybody in New Mexico, in fact, everybody in Albuquerque doesn't have internet access. So to try to say, oh, go to our website, everybody can't go to your website. And especially people who live over in the International District in Southeast Albuquerque and the South Valley. So you got a lot of people who are getting left out, and they're in poor communities, underserved communities, and they're in communities that are not white. Okay. And I said what I said. They're in communities that are not white. Okay. And start whatever arguments you want. But I know for a fact that America doesn't care for Black people, Muslim people, and a whole lot of other people. Otherwise, we wouldn't be trying to pass laws about our hair. That's a shame. That's a doggone shame. In 2021, people still have to worry about something that they don't have no control over. What hair is growing on their head, or what they want to wear on their head in observation of their culture or their religion. So anyway, that's what I have. If y'all can remember all that, I know I talk a lot.
I took some notes though. I hope so we can follow up on some stuff at our next meeting, especially this educational initiative idea. I think we should hash out a little bit at the next meeting what that might look like and how we could do it, because that's a great idea. Also, I don't want to cut anybody off, but we only have about 5 minutes and we still need to have the discussion about the staffing and the budget. So go ahead, Mike, and then I want to hear from Samia, and then we got to move on.
My suggestion was if the committees could meet before next meeting.
I agree. Do we even know who's on the committees now? We have new members, and where do the committees stand?
Well, could we take a minute to do that, please?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, absolutely. Member Assad, what did you want to say?
I was just about to suggest that we have a subcommittee meeting with the educational committee. And I would like to, because I have to jump off, like I'm 20 minutes late, but I would like to add on to the education component to address the human rights, lifting up human rights vis-a-vis a lot of what was said today in community as well. So that's something we could talk about at the subcommittee. I have to jump off. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry if I cut it short. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I don't know what we need to do. I guess we just, go ahead. Yes, please. Member Patel.
Yeah, just last I recall, I know Douglas and I are on, and Douglas is still a member of this board. No? Okay, just kidding. So then I am the only member on the communications committee, and I don't know who was on education and outreach last, but I would be very interested in doing some outreach around COVID. There's a lot of misinformation that I think is important to clear up, and I'm happy to kind of lead that discussion if anybody just, I know Jefferson, you said you're interested, so we can like meet and talk about that and present it at the next meeting.
So here's the other issue is I think, and let's just talk about it, but I don't think we can reform the committees and assign membership to the committees at this meeting, because the council, I think, is expected to approve our 2 additional new members like tomorrow. So at February's meeting, we'll have 4 people who are really very recent additions to the board and don't have committee membership. And so if it's okay with y'all, I think if we could put committee formation and membership assignment on the February agenda, but I don't think we can do it tonight because we have 2 people who aren't here that will be here. Is that okay with you, Member Jefferson, or no? Do you want to go ahead and meet without the new people in between now and then, or what do you want to do?
I mean, I think we should get started on some of the issues and then bring, because the committees, if you can remember, can only have, they have to be less than quorum. Otherwise, we're violating the public whoever acts, somebody
Okay,
acts.
so a maximum of 3 members on a committee.
Right.
Mhm.
And so I mean, if we met now, we only got a week left for this month, and we got 2 weeks in the first part of February before we meet, because we meet on the third Tuesday. So I mean, those those new members, as long as it doesn't make 4, could join those committee meetings.
Right. But we're not, then our 2 newest members who aren't here tonight don't get an opportunity to be on that committee.
How is that?
Well, if we have 3 people on the committee, then it's full, right? We can't have more than 3. Is that
Well,
right?
my committee only has 2
Okay,
strata.
okay,
That's
so,
right.
okay, yeah, well, then I think it's great if the 2 of you want to meet before the
No,
February.
no, no. What I'm saying is the other committee was only Strata and Douglas. So there are openings in the committee. The committees have room for 1 or 2 more members.
Okay. Go ahead, Member Patel.
Yeah, so just hearing more, I wasn't aware about that there were 2 additional new members aside from the new ones that we have on today. I think it does make sense to actually wait for them. I don't mind like working on something individually and then bringing that to present or like to discuss further at like whenever we're able to meet as a committee, especially after we form them, because I think it would be great to have more input on this, and like what kind of gaps people see about like any kind of information and things, um, just because we're from different communities and
Yeah.
in different
Well, I
spaces.
think, would it be possible then maybe if you and Mike and I could meet in between this meeting and the next to talk about a few of these things and see if we can't be a little further along by the next meeting? Because I hear Mike's desire not to just not have done anything between now and the next time, so that we don't have anything that we can talk about when we have these same questions come up again. So maybe the 3 of us could schedule a committee formation group meeting or something in between now and then, if that's okay. And then we can formalize the committees at the February meeting. Is that all right?
Keep in mind, we also, Brother Chairman, we have to keep in mind that whatever we discuss in committee, that if we want it on the agenda, we got to do it in enough time to give it to the staff so that it makes, all the public, whatever that public law name is.
Yeah. Okay. So can anybody right now name the committees that we had before?
We had research and investigation, we had the outreach committee, and we had the education committee that was putting together the media thing, the movie thing. We had those 3 committees.
Okay. So that means, yeah, investigation and research is exactly what it sounds like, right? That's what we're empowered to do, and thinking about how to use that authority. Outreach was to actually build relationships with community groups and community organizations to this board who maybe don't know that we exist and what we do, and that, like even having APD Forward come in and present tonight, we had to know APD Forward to do that. So are there places where we could be building more community relations? And then education is just exactly that. Like, are we going to think about offering certain trainings as a board? We had entered into some discussion around like a half-day film festival, human rights film festival potentially, like that. So that hasn't gotten traction, but that's one of the ideas that was generated around that committee. So just for Member Trujillo, Member Pierre to think about that in terms of if you're thinking about signing up for one of the committees, would be great. Okay, the last thing that we have, yeah, there's a lot of good training ideas in the chat too. That's great. And then, so the last thing on the agenda is actually to talk about the budget and the staff. We're over by 5 minutes already. So, and also member Aset dropped out when I know that she had something to add about why we need these things and what kind of staff. But is anybody else in the room wanting to speak to that to at least begin the discussion before we wrap tonight? Or should we postpone that to the February agenda so that we can give it the full attention it deserves? I agree, y'all. Yeah. Go ahead, please. Member Jefferson.
Yeah, you know, I hate to keep being a killjoy about taking things to the next agenda. But you know, this staff has been a question over a year now. Now, I don't fully understand it. That's why I wanted to hear the other side. And but since member side is gone, I don't know if member Patel may have anything about what 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 is the need for staff and what our needs are.
I think that's a legitimate question, and I think that I mean, it has to come from us, right? Do we need more of a budget, and do we need staff? And if so, can we articulate what it's for, right? Because Michelle said that she's happy to help us be put into consideration for that if we can articulate it. But what's the money that we need? What is the money for? And what would what would a staff person be for beyond Tori, Michelle, and really Crystal, who's also totally here to help us all the time. So what more would we need so that we can really make a compelling case in terms of trying to add a line item to the budget? And I don't know. I don't know if we need this or not. So I'm not the best one to be the proponent for it. I agree that APD Forward is a great example of a group that doesn't have a whole lot of resource and does a lot. We can certainly do a lot with what we have. We haven't fully utilized even, I think, the two offices that are here to collaborate with us and work with us and for us. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to quash this request at all. I want us to get what we need as a board to be effective for the citizens of Albuquerque in our capacity. But I'm not sure that I can sketch that out effectively or know what that is. So I am also not trying to just say, let's move things to the next agenda so we don't have to talk about them. But I know that Samia was somebody who feels very passionately about this and has some real like talking points around what she thinks we need. And now she's not here. So I don't know. Like, I feel like we need to put it at the top of the next agenda. Okay. Okay. All right.
I agree with that. I think it's, and I feel like it's been kind of like a not like a full conversation. So I think it's really appropriate to move it to the top of our next agenda so that we can give it the full attention it deserves.
Okay.
And really see from like any of our new members too, like what they think and what their thoughts might be.
And I know our brand new folks next time won't have a context for that discussion as much, but I would love their input. I mean, that'll be the cohort that we're moving forward with. I think it's good to have all of those voices in the room, and yeah, let's have it be a generative discussion that isn't now feeling so hemmed in by being already over time. And it definitely to include member Aset in the discussion, I think, from my point of view. Okay, so is there any other yeah, Zachariah, thank you for your question in the chat. I think we're just trying to figure that out too. I think a lot of times when we offer educational opportunities like this, when the Office of Equity and Inclusion does, it's for the public at large. It's definitely just to offer public trainings on things that we feel passionate about, that we think have to do with human rights, and that we think are important to put on offer for the general public is what I think we would be doing. And we would love to collaborate with community groups to do that. I think for us, that makes a lot of sense. We know, I mean, I'm an executive director of a local nonprofit, a statewide nonprofit. So we know there's a lot of expertise and a lot of experience in offering educational initiatives this way. So I think this will be on our agenda for next time as well. And we'll try to think about how we can do that in a collaborative way that'll benefit the folks in our city. Thank you for asking. All right. Is there any final, yeah, please, Member Jefferson, go ahead.
The committees also is open to members from the public can be on the committees
Great.
and can work with the committees. And we have had on the Research and Investigation Committee, we have had members of the public. The members of the public do not count against the quorum. Only so that means on the committee, you can't have a quorum from the board, but you can have 10, 15, 20, you can have 100 members if you can stand that headache. But I just wanted to put that out there since a young man and other people are putting things in the chat that they can work on these committees with us, and we would love your expertise.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that reminder too about the committee composition, because I think that's really crucial. To me, especially the education committee, we should invite people who are out in our communities doing this work to join us. I think that would be the most effective way for us to use the resources that we have as well, right? So that's perfect. Thank you so much. All right, are there any additional comments, questions, any final business before we adjourn? All right, terrific. Hearing none, then we will adjourn the meeting of the City of Albuquerque's Human Rights Board at 6:40 p.m. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. We'll see you next month, and I'll reach out to some members in the interim to have a small group meeting.